All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. We begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah to send peace and blessings upon our messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inshallah, we're going to continue our study, if I can speak, on Muslim history, or a survey of Muslim history. We've been going through approximately 60, 70 years of Muslim history a week. Last week when we were together, we had talked about the transition from the Umayyad Khilafah to the Abbasid Khilafah. Remember, these were both dynasties. Actually, that was 2 weeks ago. Last week we talked about how it split up into its natural states, that after the major event known as the Mihna, and let me see if you guys have been paying attention. Anyone remember what the Mihna was?
Wait, give us like 30 seconds to think about
Scholarships?
No. Yes.
The Mu'tazila?
Yes, they had something to do with Mu'tazila.
Oh, the Inquisition.
The Inquisition.
Sorry.
The only Inquisition that has ever taken place in Muslim history has been about the creativeness of the Quran, who has authority, who doesn't. And it was when the major conversation of the palace tried to enforce Mu'tazili thought, a strand of theology, to the Muslim empire or the Muslim community, and they rebelled. And what was established at that point is, what would Muslims take seriously? Would they take seriously what the palace imposed on them? No, they would actually take seriously the other side, which is they choose their own scholars and their own scholarship. And Ahmad ibn Hanbal becomes like the major kind of point of that. Why that is really important is, today you're going to see a hugely divided khilafah. I don't know why it takes so much longer for that to load in mine. Oh, it's coming. Okay. You're going to see a hugely divided khilafah with 4 major regions. We can make the argument 5. We're going to talk about 4 of them today, right? But it's going to be what we call generally North Africa. I'm going to exclude the Umayyads of Spain here. Why they're relevant? Remember, the Umayyad family, when they were all killed, it was literally like, what is that thing, the Red Wedding? I don't follow common things.
What?
Is that the Game of Thrones thing? Is it called the Red Wedding? It was based off of what happened to the Umayyads. So I don't know how fictional things work. But they were all invited to a dinner and the entire family was killed. One person escaped, which was Abdurrahman. He started the Umayyad dynasty, which from 756 to 1031 until he gets taken over by the Almorads. We'll talk about them later in their own session, because they don't follow any of the rules of the rest of Muslim history. So that'll be a separate thing that we do. But the major areas will be kind of North Africa, will be one major subsection. You'll have Egypt, that's going to start becoming extremely relevant. Egypt has been relevant because it's been the breadbasket of the Muslim world since the time of Umar ibn Khattab. When Amr ibn As takes it over, Alexandria was the breadbasket of half of the world's population. So that's been relevant, but they've been giving all of that grain still to the Byzantine Empire because it's supporting the majority of it. You're going to have what we would call the traditional seats of power, which would be generally Baghdad is kind of contested, but Baghdad and the Hijaz region and most of Syria and we would consider Iraq and Iran today. And then you'd have the farther eastern regions are turning into their own position, which it'll be kind of where Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, they start becoming culturally relevant and significant in this portion of Muslim history pretty significantly. But those are the general areas. There are, with the exception of the Umayyads, they are all under Abbasid rule, but you'll find that they're basically independent governments at this point that constantly kind of fight amongst each other. Last week what we also focused on was after the Sunnis, quote unquote, had their Inquisition, they realized the palace is not going to be where religiosity or religiousness is going to come from. That's going to come from the streets. So what starts to happen in the palaces is actually what we'll talk about today. There's going to be at one point 4 major Shi'i dynasties, 5 major Sunni dynasties. Technically 6, but we'll keep it simple to make it 5. 9 or 10 in total, depending on how you divide them. They'll be ruling at any one point. First, what I'm going to do is go over the major Shi'i dynasties at that time, Qaramads, Fatimids, Hamdanids, and Buwayhids or Buyids. And then we'll talk about the major Sunni dynasties, Seljuks, Ghaznavids. I'm not going to go through the rest of them for now. You'll get to them when it's time. Safavids and others. But anyway, this is generally where they rule, and I'm going to go over a quick, brief description of why each one is kind of distinctly different than the others. All right? It's going to be a lot of names. Do you need to remember all the names? No, not really, but you should be familiar. And it'll also tell you how the major Muslim communities are divided up today. But in order to first understand that, we have to appreciate the Shi'i Imams. If one of you was asked what's the major differences between Sunnis and Shi'as, How would you answer? Asir.
They had a religious dispute after the Prophet, peace be upon him, passed away over the leadership of like the Muslim Ummah.
That's true, theologically speaking. Though, when did they become a separate community? If we were to ask that question,
After
was it
Muawiyah.
after the Prophet ﷺ?
It wasn't directly after, but I think it was after Muawiyah, right? Like,
It would
that
actually.
was the first sunnah, right?
No, so there would be disagreements amongst, there wouldn't be on theological lines, Sunnis and Shias. There would be disagreements the whole time. Just like if anytime politics are decided, is everyone happy with who the leader was elected? No, of course not. Like that's going to always have some degree of change. But where they become theologically separated, or separated in terms of actual practice of communities away from each other, will actually be at Karbala. Remember, Karbala was 680, when the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, Hussein, was massacred. Him and his whole family, 680, that's when they separate as a community. But when do they get culturally established will be in the 800s, which we're going to see today. And I'll talk about really why that occurs. But the major difference is actually not who takes political rulership after the Prophet ﷺ, it's who has religious rule after the Prophet ﷺ. The Sunni tradition, who has religious rule, the ability to interpret the Quran and Sunnah after the Prophet passes away. What's the Sunni answer?
Any scholar.
Technically, everyone. Every Muslim, and by definition what that comes down to is every learned Muslim, so the Muslims get to elect for themselves who will be interpreting the Quran and Sunnah. None of them are allowed to change the Quran and Sunnah, but who gets to interpret it is the community decides. In the Shi'i tradition, who gets to interpret the Quran and the Sunnah will be the appointed imams that the Prophet ﷺ put forward. Now, there will be a difference even there. How do you define imam? That's what this is about to explain, all right? Generally, it's understood the Prophet ﷺ left no male children alive. That sounds like a weird way. None of his male children survived past his own lifetime. I think that made it sound really odd. So I'm going to be more specific with my language. So the Prophet ﷺ, no one disputes that he is a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does being a messenger mean? That will be disputed by certain of these groups, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then it's generally understood that he has one daughter who outlives him. Her name is Fatima radiallahu anha. Radiallahu anha, may peace be upon her. Or may Allah be pleased with her. Anyway, so she is married to Ali radiallahu anhu, who is the Prophet ﷺ's cousin. So, through Ali and Fatima, they have two children, Hassan and Hussein. And generally that's understood to be the first imam after the Prophet ﷺ in the Shi'i tradition is Ali, second will be Hassan, third will be Hussein. That's the order of them. They both get martyred, Hassan and Hussein. And then you have actually Zayn al-Abidin, who will be among the only ones who survives Karbala. He was only a teenager when Karbala occurred. And so he survives, and then he has children. There will be Muhammad Baqir, and then there will be Zayd al-Shahid. It generally passes through to the firstborn child. And that will be Muhammad al-Baqir. But there's also a Zayd al-Shahid. Why this becomes interesting is this is where the first major division starts taking place. Where, depending on who counts it, they will consider either Ali radiallahu anhu as the first imam, or they will be counting him as the zero, or the second imam, because the Prophet ﷺ would have been the first one. If you do that, you go to the Zaydi tradition of Shi'ism, which has only 5 imams. Alright? If you go by the others, they continue down this line. This will start making sense in a second. Alright? Which will be Muhammad Baqir, then Ja'far as-Sadiq. Ja'far as-Sadiq also has 2 sons. He has first Ismail, and second Musa al-Kadhim. This creates another division amongst the Shi'i community. Why? Some will take Musa al-Kadhim to be the rightful heir, and that's the Ithna Ashari tradition, that's the majority of Shias today. Others will say, no, it was Muhammad Ismail. Why? 2 reasons. One, some will doubt whether he's actually his son or his adopted son. That'll be one division. The others will say, if you look at the dates here, Ja'far as-Sadiq dies 765, Ismail dies 760. How could an imam, who's supposed to be the next one, die before his father? So, even though he was supposed to be the imam, it ends up being the younger brother, Musa al-Kadhim, who lives past him. This also creates another major theological division amongst these, which will be, the 12er Shi'is will say it is by lineage. Therefore, the one who outsurvives him actually continues. The Ismaili tradition will say, no, it's by knowledge. That Ismail is old enough, even though he dies before his father, he is old enough to have a son who's Muhammad al-Mahdi, who he passes on the imamship to. That will be the seveners. There's going to be 3 major sects of Shiism that still are alive today. Zaydis are actually very close to the Sunni tradition, which is they actually don't consider the imams being divine. They consider them being righteous rulers. That's why they should be followed. These are divinely appointed. But the difference is, they said it's by lineage. That lineage provides them with special knowledge as to how to be leaders of the Muslim community. Versus in this case, it's not lineage, it's a special knowledge that was passed on to lineage. Will be the Ismaili tradition today. Alright? Just before we move on to who corresponds with which dynasty, questions, yes?
Why is one highlighted in blue in the middle?
Ali al-Rida, because who we're going to talk about today will be Ali al-Rida. In terms of like who makes a deal with the Abassids to be included will be him. So that's why he's highlighted today. Yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe this is like a stupid question, but why are they doing all of this? Like, why are they doing this from like Ali radiallahu anhu? Like, the Prophet ﷺ had other relatives that were Muslim that were alive. Why not through their lineage? Like, why was Ali special? Like, that they did all of this? Like, just because he's his relative? Well, he has other relatives. Like, he's the closest? Like, what's...
That is a great question, and a couple of different ways to answer that, right? One will be because there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. In the Shi'i narrative, there is Eid al-Ghadir, a moment in which, towards the end of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, he gathers a group of community members together and says that Ali is from me and I am from Ali, right? And he like establishes this relationship of Mawla, which translates to either master, protective friend, supporter, right? And he says that, and there isn't really narrations of the Prophet ﷺ doing that to anyone else. The Sunni narrative will say the Prophet ﷺ did that because a lot of people were upset with Ali radiallahu anhu for some of the military or political decisions that he had made. So to make sure that it was understood that he's happy with Ali, that's what's done. Others say, no, this is him passing on political leadership. So that will be one reason. Another is he's related to the Prophet ﷺ in multiple ways. He is both the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ and also the son-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's a double relation. So he's the closest of those who are related to the Prophet ﷺ. And so there's a host of reasons why it's the case. I could spend the next 45 minutes talking about this, but I'm not going to.
To counter the first point, I'm sorry. I will stop after this. I promise. This is a whole separate. But aren't there so many different hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ being like, I'm with him and he is with me,
Yeah.
we're close, we're best friends.
The Prophet ﷺ said that about Judaybi, companion who had no family. The Prophet ﷺ said that about Najashi,
Right.
who's all the way in Abyssinia. So yes, there are going to be many of those. I will tell you, you are not arguing with someone who believes.
Okay, that's all I want. I'm sorry, Tom. Continue.
Why does both of them stop at like 6 and 7 and then one goes on until like 12?
That is a great question. Alright? Muhammad al-Mahdi is considered, if you've ever heard a hadith about the Mahdi, he is considered the Mahdi. He ushers in the end times. And he goes under an occultation. Like it disappears. Same thing with Muhammad al-Mahdi on this side. So they all stop somewhere. And that's why even today's day, if you think about, is there a living Shi'i Imam today? The answer is, depends on which branch of Shi'ism you're talking about. But generally speaking, no, because Muhammad al-Mahdi is here. And he goes into what's known as Zaleba or occultation, and he'll come back and have like a messianic role towards the end of time. So that's why their fiqh won't change all that much from typical Sunni fiqh, right? And on this side, depending on who you ask, if you ask a traditional Ismaili, you're going to have something similar. But if you ask certain Ismailis, like the Aga Khanis, there is a dude who's living in France, who is, the Aga Khani's belief system is that he is the, sounds even weird to say it, reincarnation of God on earth.
Oh, that just should.
Yeah, that's spot on.
I'm
condone
presenting
that,
what's
Chaplain?
there.
Do you
Huh?
condone that, Chaplain?
Of course not. but it does. This is where it's going to be interesting, though. I told you guys this last week. Shi'i theology has a much bigger spectrum than Sunni theology. Why? Because it's kind of like the idea of, if I asked right now, where do you all want to go out to eat, right? And we all have to agree where we go to eat before we go to eat somewhere. We're going to choose like pizza or Turkish food. Like, those will be the two options, for the most part, that everyone can agree on. But if I said, no, Medina gets to decide, and Medina has like very peculiar tastes, right? We might end up in like, I don't know, a French restaurant. I
Don't
don't
do
know,
that
I don't even
to
know if
Medina.
there's even one around here.
Escargot for everyone.
Yes, snails for all of you, right? I'm like, wait, how'd that happen? Because one person made the choice and not everyone. This will be kind of like, why, do things change very slowly in the Sunni theology? They do. But they will almost never change for that reason too. Because everyone has to agree on it. Versus here, a new idea will be brought in and actually change the community, because it's a smaller community, a smaller group of people making that decision. That make sense? Okay. So, now, why did I give you all of this? Why are we talking about history? Is because of the four Shi'i dynasties that take place, the Hamdanids, the Buwayhids, they are Ithna Asharis, in the middle. You will have, the Zaydis won't really have a thing of themselves, but then you'll have on the other side, Qarmats and Fatimids are the seven Imam people. That'll be there. They will fight each other a lot. Is kind of going to be it, and they will be the ruling powers at the time, and that'll explain to you some of the things that they do. All right, so now with that introduction, so in case you wanted it without all the rest of it, the order of them, 12 here, the Zaydis are the 5ers, and the Ismailis are the 7. So, make sense? Good. These are the ones we're going through today, the 9 that I told you about. We could technically make these Safavids and Seljuks. I'm not going to do that. And generally speaking, this is the era we're talking about. Do all of them exist at the same time? Kind of. If we captured it perfectly at around 890, this is what it would look like. Spoiler alert, when will this end? When the Crusaders invade. And this actually kind of makes sense, that the Muslim community is so divided. How did that happen? Well, because they're not being attacked. Is the average Muslim on the street actually worrying about all of these divisions? The answer is no. They're interacting with their scholars. This controls things like taxes. This controls things, once in a while it becomes problematic. When the Qarmats come in and they take over the Kaaba, they catapult it and do a siege of Mecca, kill all of the Hujjaj, and break the Black Stone. Then suddenly they will be kicked out. But if they're not doing something like that, the rest of the Muslim Ummah doesn't really seem to care all that much. So, just kind of interesting to think about when we look at all those divisions. The first one we're going to talk about is going to be the most problematic ones. It's going to be the Qarmats. The Qarmats were, they generally come from Bahrain to Mecca. Why I use the concept of Bahrain is they are actually what we would call the inheritors, if not by lineage, then at least by ideas, of the Khawarij. The Khawarij were those that left the mainstreams of Islam, and they actually fulfilled that quite significantly. They really don't like the Fatimids, and are able to, at one point, only for a brief moment, conquer Kufa, which is, Kufa has been historically such a huge site. That's where Ali radiallahu anhu had his Khilafah set up. It's been a really important city. And the reason they don't like the Fatimids is because they don't recognize Ubaydullah al-Mahdi, who is claiming to be the ruler that was appointed by Muhammad al-Mahdi. So they don't like him, they don't want that, he's one to occultation, like, we don't follow your line. So one of the most things that they're famous for, and they don't have any really good things to be famous for, but they take the Kaaba in 930. When I say they take the Kaaba, they kill approximately 12 to 20,000 Hujjaj, and they dump their bodies after poisoning them into the well of Zamzam. The well of Zamzam is going to be poisoned for decades until it gets purified later on.
Oh my god.
Yep. And you might answer, why they do this? Let me tell you some other things. They siege the Kaaba, and as it catapult into the Haram itself when it was being defended, and they break portions of the Kaaba, they end up stealing the black stone, smashing it into pieces, And then the black stone is lost for about 20 years. It appears once again, just thrown into the haram 21 years later. And that's why to this day, when you see the hatim that's put forward on the black stone, it's actually to keep it all together because the Qarmas had destroyed it so significantly. Yep. And that's also the black stone today is not one stone. It's actually 19 pebbles with a like a composite stone that they've actually put in. So if you've had the opportunity to, I feel very apologetic to say that I've touched the black stone because it's a huge.
Why are you flexing on
I'm
us?
so sorry. But when you do, you'll notice it's actually kind of bumpy. You'll see a little couple of the pebbles that you can touch. You can touch 9 of them. I did not touch all 9 of them because I didn't have that much time.
What?
My head was stuffed into it by some random dude and taken back out. That's how most of us experience the black stone to this day and age. Anyway, but that was done, White Stone Flaw, because of what the Qarmats had done to the black stone. It's actually a pretty terrible legacy.
Why?
And now, great question, that's why I have this. The movement claims to be at the end of Islam, it's an apocalyptic state. Meaning they doubt the Sharia no longer applies. That they are bringing on their version of the Dajjal because time has ended. Muhammad al-Mahdi has passed. Because remember, they were the Shi'i tradition that had the Ismailis or what? The 7 Imams. Muhammad al-Mahdi has passed. The Mahdi is gone. Now this is the end of time. We're just waiting for Ya'juj and Ma'juj to come and ravage the whole world. So why do anything anyway? Yes?
Do they not believe in like the other signs of the end of times?
No. So, well, it's also difficult to say what they fully believe and what they don't because no one claims to be a Qarmat today. So, as you can imagine, why not? So that will be there. They have no Sharia, no prayer, no rituals. They start insulting prophets. They start some groups of them start worshiping fire. They shared everything. When I say they shared everything, women were considered property. And there was no such thing as marriage.
What the hell? Wait, where is this?
This is the rules of the Qarmats. They start in Bahrain, but at one point they rule almost all of Hijaz.
What's happening?
Yeah,
So-
kind of crazy, right?
What's going on?
There were extremes.
They decided to become the Dajjal, basically.
They decided to become, I would make the argument, Ya'juj and Ma'juj.
How does one decide to become
That's such a good question.
That is a great question, because they believe that at the end of time, nothing matters anymore. All has already been decided, so you can kind of do whatever you want.
Isn't it like
The
what is
purge?
the end of times? Like you lock in?
That's what you would assume, if you have a worldview that says righteousness is important. So,
Like Deidre's just smart. Okay, like I'm doing qiyam, right? Like you know what I mean?
good, that should be the response.
Is it kind of like the purge where it's like if there's no laws, everybody goes crazy?
Yeah.
So that's their mentality?
Seems like
that?
it. Yes, fair.
Is that why on the map there's one like pink line that went through?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because they don't fully, if I go back to it, they don't fully rule the entirety of it. They are here, and then they eventually get to Kufa, and they get to Mecca at a point. But as you can imagine, it's relatively short-lived. Even this is pretty long. That's where they are on the outskirts. When they are actually majorly is from 930 to about 950. Very quickly, the Muslims hear about what's happening. They're like, why did it take 20 years? Information doesn't spread as fast as it does today. So it takes some time to kick them out, but they get kicked out relatively quickly. Yeah. Yes.
Were the different parts of, I guess, the, what did you call them? The dynasties, were they aware of the other, like,
What they were
ways of
doing?
practice?
No.
And, like, for example, people in North Africa, did they know what was happening, like,
For the most part, no. When they did, they would then get involved to try to fix it. Yeah. Yes.
Another question on the map. It like splits off into like south until the sea. Am I reading that correctly?
Here, they control the ports. Yeah.
Well, they control all the ports.
Yeah. The Hijaz region, but to this day, no one controls this region. You know why? It's a desert. Yeah. Yes.
So they're just not Muslim?
Yes, in today's how we would classify who is a Muslim and not, they'd probably not pass most of our litmus tests. So you are correct. Yeah. The Qarmats were kind of crazy. And then the other thing is they shared everything. I already told you that. They wanted to create the ideal city that gets no attacks ever. I don't know. That's at least what their texts say. So they're trying to create this utopia by creating a dystopia. I don't get it. No one claims to be a Qarmat scholar today, because like, they're a weird branch. Their leader leaves rule to his young son, Isfahani, this young Isfahani kid, and because he's the new reincarnation of the Mahdi. Now he gets completely destroyed, and Qarmat's, their theology kind of ends right then. They're defeated by who? The Fatimids. Because the Fatimids, of course, they didn't like them to begin with, but once they figure out everything that's happened and they recruit power, the Fatimids will actually take them over. So again, Fatimids, they start in 909, though they gain prominence after they destroy the Qarmats, because the Muslim community will actually really like the Fatimids. Because why? They kicked out those crazy Qarmats. Do you see how the logic goes here? Even though their origin is earlier, they are also another Ismaili tradition. And they want to reclaim that, no, this is not what Ismailism is about. Look, we kicked them out. Make sense? And it's from a grassroots preaching theology from Iran. First rulers is from Tunisia is Ubaydullah al-Mahdi. And he kills the preacher that actually got him into this role. That's a whole other idea. I'm just planting that seed because the Ottomans will perfect that. Where whoever actually establishes your theology might be the one who might be able to undo people's love for you, so you kill them.
Wait, what?
It's a terrible practice that takes place. But think about it this way. Does Trump turn on Steve Bannon? It's history repeating itself. Think about it. Person gets in power. What is the first thing the person in power does? Oh no, this person got me popular. They can get me unpopular. Let me go ahead and take my popularity and make them unpopular first. We think that these things have changed. They really haven't. History repeats itself over and over and over again. Anyway. He calls for renovation of Islam, wanted the Mahdi to arrive from the lineage of Ismail, saying that wasn't actually the Mahdi. Mahdi we have to inculcate for them to actually appear. So it's an anti of the Qarmat theology. He converts a lot of Bedouins to their cause and they take over Tunisia. That's how they first start up. They're really big when it comes to relationships outside of the Muslim world. They do a really good job of cultivating a good relationship with the Byzantine Empire until they don't. Why I say that is, they will have a ruler amongst them who will just do kind of crazy things. Al-Hakim bin Amrillah, we'll talk about him in a couple of slides, but he will do things like he will ban mulukhiyah.
What?
If anyone who's Egyptian,
What?
will tell you like, wait, why would you do that? It's like the best thing ever. Yeah, it's like a better spinach.
Way better. Way tastier.
Because why? There'll be a bunch of conspiracy theories as to why he does this, but he's seen as this weird divine figure by some and just a madman by others. We'll talk about him in a second. But he connects a lot of trade. He establishes trade to India and Europe. So he becomes the middleman between literally like trade items, spices, cloth from India, that was a major export, all the way to Europe. And from Europe would be things like lumber, and Europe only has like bland things. It's always only had bland things. Lumber and clay and other things will start going the other way. He develops a relationship to Italy and Sicily, and that's interesting because it had been stopped. The Umayyads are typically the ones who have a relationship there, but he actually reestablishes it, and even with the Umayyads as well. So he really expanded and builds relationships with other Muslim dynasties because they don't want to fight them. Think of the Fatimids as doing the opposite of what the Qarmats did. They leave behind a pretty insane legacy. Oh, if you want to see how the Fatimid, I don't expect you to know any of these, but if you want to see how like the Fatimid rulers kind of go in, they're from the Imams, but once Muhammad al-Mahdi goes into this occultation and he's not the actual real Mahdi, he appoints a family to be the vicegerents of basically the Imams, and that's who's ruling as the Fatimid rulers. And then there's many different groups of them. The Boras, for example, they actually exist to this day. Shi'is are actually an extension of the Fatimids of that time. What takes the Fatimids out will be Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. Why? Because as they are ruling, generally they're well liked. But when your empire is under attack, you suddenly say, make Islam great again. And you don't want a random ruler that no one believes their theology. You want people that look like you to be your rulers, because only they can defend you from the invasion of groups that are coming in. So it becomes, make them look like us again, and suddenly it will be, people won't take the rulership of someone who has a different theology than them. But we'll get there. Other things that they do, they start Azhar University, which sometimes claims to be the longest running university in the world. Is this actually true?
No.
No. What is it? Tarawiyun. Where is it? Morocco, yes. There are two debates as to where it is. Qarawiyun in Morocco or in Yemen.
Wait, what's the university?
Qarawiyun.
Qarawiyun?
It was started by a woman by name is Fatima, what is her last name? Fihri, Fatima Fihri, yep. So the first university in the world was actually started by Fatima Fihri. So anyway, that's there. Oxford will make its claim. She beat it by like 400 years, but anyway. But Azhar always claims that it's actually before Oxford too, because Oxford claims to be about 1,000. So beat it by 30 years. Does not really matter, who cares? Knowledge has been passed on forever. But then, sometimes it's nice to have first. He started Azhar as an Ismaili, or the Fatima started off as an Ismaili study center. Azhar exists to this day. It's one of the most popular, influential and significant Muslim universities in the world, even though more recently it has been very problematic because of its relationship to colonial powers, and the appointments of colonial power people like Sisi. Okay, but he builds a ton of Fatimid structures too. So anytime you go to Egypt and you will see an 8-domed or 8-pointed minaret or dome or structure in that way, it will be made by the Fatimids. They kind of popularize it. They eventually, when they kick the Qarmats out, they remake the entirety of the Haram, and that's why those big Fatimid pillars, if you go to Mecca today, those really big octagonal minarets, actually a Fatimid creation. So that's there. But they had to do it, because why? The Qarmats had destroyed it before them. So that happens, and it's going relatively well up until Al-Hakil bil-Amrillah. We'll talk about him next week more when we talk about the Crusades. Next week we will really have to do a deep dive into the Crusades from whose perspectives, like what happens then. But he does a couple of interesting things. By some he was considered a madman, by others he was a divine figure who was getting a bunch of ilham and he was literally being talked to by Jibreel. Those will end up being the Druze. So if you want to know the origins of the Druze, it's all back to Al-Hakil al-Amrillah.
The Druze are from here?
Yep. So many connections are being made, right?
No.
But he does a couple of things that were weird. One is he bans mulukhiyah, because something in mulukhiyah is not allowing people to be spiritual. I don't know.
He just didn't like it.
I feel more spiritual when I eat one.
I don't know. I have no idea, alright? I'm reporting what we have historically. So he bans that. He does something pretty significant. He destroys the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Why I think this is interesting is, Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been actually renovated multiple times by the Muslims. The first person to renovate the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was who? Which Khalifa? Umar ibn Khattab.
Yes.
Which when he came and conquered Jerusalem, they asked whether he would like to pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and he said no. If the people saw me praying here, they will turn this into a masjid. So he grabs a stone from the ground and chucks it, and says, I will pray there. And that's why if you go into Bayt al-Maqdis to this day, you'll see a random lantern-looking thing with like a glass thing with a stone sitting there that we call Hajjat al-Umar. And everybody, what is that? It's like, that's the stone that Umar threw. Is that really the stone? I have no idea. I don't know about the historical authenticity of it, but the story is still really cool. And there will be a masjid that he had built then, but it was preserved by the Muslims up until this point. It will be someone who is oftentimes considered non-Muslim, like he's the founder of another sect. That will be the one who destroys the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That will be a trigger that Pope Urban II will use to say, look, they are destroying our holy lands. Christians were not killed. A lot of Jerusalem at that point was still actually heavily Christian at that time, because when the Muslims moved in, they never killed all of the Christians. We'll talk about what the Crusades do to Jerusalem when they move in next week. But his followers consider him divine, and they make a whole other sect, which actually becomes something that's no longer identified as Islam, called the Druze tradition. There is not a whole lot of information on what the Druze actually believe, because in their Sharia, even a Druze person is not allowed to know the theology of their tradition up until they are 40 years old. You get one version of it, and then only when you are 63 do you get the actual version of what you worship.
Our religion.
Yeah.
So if you
It's the first Scientology. I don't know, I shouldn't say that because I don't know, I've never met a Druze person. But if you ask a young Druze person what do they believe, they're going to be like, it's kept from us. So we won't actually know the answer to that. So just kind of odd and interesting. And they'll say, because look, prophets were given revelation typically by the age of 40, some of them. I always have to just ask, if I ever met one, I'd be like, what do you say to like prophets like Yusuf alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, these others? I get it, certain prophets got it at later stages, but not all of them. So I don't know what they say to that. But they're not considered Muslim by most theological standards today. So that's one major thing that leads to the decline of it seems to be a ruler that does things that the rest of the Muslim world doesn't really understand why it's happening, and he triggers the Crusades actually taking place. And then the Fatimids, Fatimids continued. Why do they fall? There's military and ethnic groups fighting amongst each other because they're like, who is this crazy ruler and what is he doing? So people are like, no, we should rule instead. And powerful nobles as well. And then the other part of this is the Ismaili population was never a major population in Egypt. It was always maybe representing 0.1%, 0.3% of the actual population of Egypt. So you couldn't maintain power for that long, especially if you do non-popular things. These Fatimids that succeeded earlier on, they were doing a bunch of public works. So we're like, all right, they believe in some weird stuff, they have some weird rituals, but they're helping everyone. But the second that their actual popular lives are being affected, and now they're hearing about crusaders coming because of something the ruler did, they start uprooting them. And the other thing will be, the last of them will be Mustansir. He has a crazy decadent rule where he starts spending so much of their money on just decoration and decking out his own palace. Be like, we've had enough. And Salahuddin al-Ayyubi will actually, not actually Salahuddin, but Nuruddin, Salahuddin's uncle, will set up a huge campaign against the Fatimids, saying they're spending on their palace while Jerusalem has been taken over, and Damascus is about to be taken over, and they've killed 100,000 Muslims already. So we'll use that to say, this is what you're doing, come to me instead. So technically Salahuddin is responsible for the Fatimids, but we'll talk about that later. I did not intend to spend that much time on just our second. We have 4 and then 5 to go through. Maybe only go through the 4 today. Questions about the Fatimids? Yes?
Just in general, how are these Shia, these crazy Shia sects allowed to make decisions for the entire Muslim Ummah? When where are the Sunnis in this?
They've gotten sick of the palace, because the palace tried to do what's in their memory. The palace tried to do an inquisition. So as long as they don't affect the day-to-day lives of the Muslims, they don't care who's in the palace. So that's why the proof of it is when Hakim starts doing weird stuff, they kick him out. But when the others weren't, do what you want in the palace. They don't really care. As long as trade is coming in, public works are being provided for, there's justice on the streets, they don't seem to care. But when there isn't, then they care, or we're being attacked and they're not doing anything about it. It's like, do your job. If you're not doing your job, we'll kick you out. That's what ends up happening. One of the biggest inventions of the Fatimids will be the city of Cairo. By the way, side note, I want everyone to be very cautious how they use AI like ChatGPT and stuff. I asked ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago to tell me about the conquest of Amr ibn al-As, 250 years before this, and how he was conquering, brought the Muslims into Egypt. According to it, he first went to Cairo, then went to Alexandria, which makes sense when it comes to if you looked at a map of Egypt today. You know what the problem with it is? Cairo isn't made as a city yet. If I had known that, I would have told, do you see the problem? Be careful, it's not actually drawing in, so anytime you're using AI type sources, you should be relatively competent in the field you're asking it, because when it hallucinates, you won't know.
Hallucinates?
Yeah, so just wanted to get that out there. According to it, Amr ibn As took over Cairo and then Alexandria. Wait, but Cairo wasn't built until 969, and he lived in 650. So, just word of wording. Okay.
He has a masjid in Cairo too.
Amr ibn As? Yeah, it's a huge one. There's many masjids named after him, but it's the 4th biggest masjid up until the 2000s. It was the 4th biggest masjid on earth.
He purposely chose that masjid because the Nile ran through it, and that's why it wasn't a city yet. Because the Nile is not. Yeah, now the Nile's.
Yeah. But we talked about him in detail not a couple of weeks ago in our student class. Amr ibn As, alhamdulillah. But anyway, so they built Cairo, and that's why Cairo is emblematically a Fatimid city. Egyptians get so mad at me when I say that, but it is. Sorry. It doesn't become relevant up until Ain Jalut in 1260, because it'll be what repels the Mongol attacks, but Cairo will be established by the Fatimids. So I'm sorry if you don't like these. Egypt is my adopted country, so I always also like saying that. Now, continuing forward. So we've done 2 of these so far. We've done the Qadmats and the Fatimids. We're going to do the Hamdanids and Buwayhids and probably call it a day. I will not give you the rest of these, at least today, because I think it's information overload for you. Hamdanids, 929 to 1003. Probably the smallest rule here, and their major thing is they're the middle ground between the Fatimids that we just saw ruling here, and then who will be the Buwayhids on the other side. And then the Sunni Seljuks and other stuff. They are a 12er Shi'i group. They are probably the closest related to current day 12er Shi'is. In the Muslim world, for those who want to, population-wise, there's approximately 2 billion Muslims on earth. Approximately 85 to 90% of Muslims are Sunni. 10% are Shi'i. Of that 10%, 90% are Ithna Ashari. The other 10% are divided between Ismailis, Zaydis, and a few other smaller groups. Make sense? So, though this seems like a shortly lived group, they end up being pretty culturally significant. Founder was Saif al-Dawda, the Mosul branch was Nasir al-Dawda. I don't like making, actually I lied, I love making commentary on the modern world today. But they are as Syrian as you can be. What I mean by that is,
Racial profiling.
Saif al-Dawla rules from the north, and then the Mosul branch rules from the south. Syria has never been one place. So, just a thing that's been there. That's like when everyone's like, Syria, I'm like, Syria, may Allah return it to its glory, I mean. But it's always been a place that was like left over. Like, Lebanon has a historic claim. Palestine definitely has a historic claim. Some of the other places do. Syria doesn't. Syria was always whatever was left over from Turkey, from Jordan, from Lebanon. Like whatever's left over is Syria. But that's kind of how it's always been ruled anyway. But they were a buffer between the Fatimids and the Buwayhids. The Fatimids, again here, Buwayhids on the other side of them. Why? Because they're actually pretty moderate in between them. Their city of control is Aleppo. And they have some of the biggest names in philosophy and culture that we read to this day. Al-Mutanabbi, the agreed upon best poet that the Arabs have ever produced from this time. Al-Farabi, oftentimes called the father of the science, not Farabi, that'll be Ibn Haytham. But anyway, Al-Farabi, he's a political science who brings Aristotle to the rest of the world. Then, Abu Faraj al-Isfahani, he writes Kitab al-Irani, which is the idea of like what is Iranian culture, and that defines it. Ibn Nubata Abu Yahya, the preacher who was generally understood that all preachers that came after him inherited from him. The style of what Muslims give moving talks and everything, generally established by him. The idea of like the art of giving a khutbah or preaching. Yes?
So for Al-Farabi,
Yeah.
he brought Aristotle, right? And Aristotle wasn't brought over and translated from previous Greek texts?
Yep.
If I remember correctly?
Mhm.
Okay, so he was the one who brought it.
So he's the one who brings Aristotle. Plato had been. Aristotle's democracy was never his metaphysics was, but his political order was never brought in up until Farabi.
Okay.
So you have this, and something interesting is it's Shi'i rulers, but the majority is Sunni populations. This part of the world, we sometimes think Iran has always been Shi'i. It's actually been majority Sunni from up until relatively modern times. My teacher made this quote, so I'm going to keep it at Yahami show. He said, Hamdanis are hopeless militarily, the Byzantines keep taking land from them, and they're really amazing when it comes to culture and buildings and poetry, really bad when it comes to military. So their role is going to be to build as much as they can before the Crusaders destroy it. And the Crusaders will keep destroying it, but and the Byzantines will attack them first, take back Antioch, Cyprus, Aleppo, and then once they're about to take over Damascus, Salahuddin comes in and stops them and pushes them all the way back to Cyprus. So that's them in a nutshell. You can see Hamdanids are here. The Byzantine Empire starts striking back here. Already did that one. Last group that we'll talk about of the Shi'i four. The Buwayhids or Buwayhids. Approximately the same era, they outlived them by a little bit. They're a gang of military leaders from Iran. They're actually local to the area in terms of where they are. They call themselves amirs, 12 rashis, but they don't claim to be imams. The rulers themselves are not religious, but they say they're appointed by the imam. So they're literally here as a placeholder in that way. They take most of Iran, Iraq, Anatolia, and Turkey by force. And under their rule, the Shi'is get organized. Why they're really important will be 2 or 3 reasons. The last Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi, has disappeared, so now they actually make a formal theology in which the 12 or Ithna Ashari tradition gets established under them. They produce the Nahlul Balagha. It is the Shi'i collection of hadith that is most highly valued. It would be the equivalent of Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Nisa'i, the Sahih Sitta combined is actually the importance of Nahl al-Balagha to the Shi'i tradition. That happens at this time, approximately 150 years after it had been done in the Sunni tradition. So that's done, but Nahl al-Balagha is formed, and this is going to be actually why, even though they're not militarily that important, they are going to be culturally very important in terms of how current day Shi'ism runs. And many things, Ashura, what you do on the day of Ashura, the idea of how Karbala is mourned, all of those shrines are actually built under the Muwahhids. And a couple of things, I didn't put a picture of their coinage and everything, but their coinage has on there the Sunni Khalifas. Because even though they are Shi'i, they want to make sure that the Shi'i tradition is going to be somehow conserved and preserved, but they don't want to cause a military issue like the Qarmats did with who? The Khalifa in Baghdad, so they will on their coinage have the Sunni Khalifa. That's my thing as puppets. But the Buyid Amir is actually the real person in charge of this region. And where they are, if you want to look at this, will be right in this region. This side onward.
Chaplain, I have a question.
Yes.
So the last imam disappeared.
Yes.
Where'd he go? Where did he go? What do you mean he disappeared? Did he die?
No.
Did he run away?
Maybe.
Like, what do you mean he disappeared?
They will believe he's in Ghaiba, which will be very similar to how Muslims believe that Isa alayhi salam was never killed, but he will come back towards the end of time. In the Ithna Ashari tradition, Muhammad al-Mahdi does the same thing. He's gone and he will reappear at the time of the end of times with Isa alayhi salam.
How can he be gone if he's like living with them? He like physically had to, like, where did he go? That's my question. What do you mean disappeared? That's very ambiguous.
He disappeared.
No, Chaplain, what does that mean?
I don't know what it means.
Like, how do you believe, okay, my issue is, how do you believe that he's gonna come back if he was right there in front of you? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but isn't that
Like,
what
where did he
Sunnis
go?
believe about Isa alayhi salam? People saw him, they interacted with him, and then Allah took him.
That's faith.
Wait, Stendi.
So that's faith.
Wait,
But
no,
that-
Yeah.
that's not what I'm saying. So Allah took Isa and like, and then he left. He's gone. But that person, the last imam, he's still there.
What do you mean he's still there?
No, like, where did he go? Is my question.
No, but they will say he bodily was disappeared.
They don't think he bodily disappeared.
They think he's bodily disappeared, like he's gone. He's only going to come back later, like Ashab al-Kahf style. Like he's just gone.
Oh. So he's just there one day and
He's just going to pop up, yeah.
So so they were like, they slept one day, they woke up, his body wasn't there, so they're like, he's gonna come back. I think he just went to grab the milk.
Yeah, there are those that will claim that he actually just died
Okay.
and didn't leave an heir, so instead of having to figure out what happened,
okay.
that would be blasphemy though, in the Ithna Ashari tradition to say something like that. So, but no, there would be occultation, he disappeared. That's the ghaiba, what that means, yes.
Is their Mahdi the same concept as our Mahdi?
This will be, this Mahdi will be, you know how even in the Sunni tradition the Mahdi will be from the lineage of the Prophet, so they're like, aha, this was him.
Yes, it is the same concept.
Yeah. Yes.
So they consider their political rulers also like religious rulers?
Yeah, so in the Shi'i tradition, the ruler is supposed to be the religious and political. There isn't really a separation. In the Sunni tradition, sometimes the ruler is motivated by religious tradition and other times they aren't. But for the most of Sunni history, or Muslim history, the rulers have not been religious rulers.
Okay, thank you.
No. Walaikum salam. So it is 6:30, or actually I should say this. Some of the most major books of the Shi'i tradition are written in this time. So when I called it the Shi'i dynasty, one is, it's weird to call a whole century off of some, like, any group. It's not like the Shi'i tradition becomes irrelevant in other times of it, but they are actually ruling majority Sunni populations at this time. But more important than that will be some of the most major texts of the Shi'i tradition will be written at this time. Nahjul Balagha, the most significant of it. The theology of Sheikh al-Mufid will be there as well. Certain Mu'tazili thought actually survives within the Shi'i tradition here as well. Tathib al-Ahkam, for example, At-Tusi, Abu Jafar, will be a major text that preserves a lot of Shi'i theology, the Mu'tazili theology within the Shi'i tradition, as it gets translated into it, will be at this time as well. So it's very culturally important in terms of what's taking place. To be fair, this is also being done in other groups as well. This is, even though Muslims are split and divided in all these different sections, it's a golden age when it comes to literature, golden age when it comes to fiqh, golden age when it comes to law, golden age when it comes to architecture. So many things are actually at their peak, even though politically things are very divided. It's 6:30. I'm not sure whether we want to do a quick run through of the Sunni dynasties. What do you guys think? Should I try to run through it in 10 minutes, or should we wait on this next week, but then that means we delay the Crusades for another week? Delay?
Yeah, because I feel like we're gonna have questions.
Okay. I'll just list them. Yeah, you probably will. I'll just list them for you right now. Like I just said, who are the four, let me see if you guys are paying attention. Who are the four Shi'i dynasties?
Qarmats.
Fatimids, and they were both the seven imams,
Seveners.
right? The seveners, the Ismailis, all right? And then the Ithna Asharis were two.
Hamdanids. Buwayhids.
And Buwayhids. Good job, nice job, I'm proud of you.
Yes.
Okay, in the Sunni dynasties, depending on how you divide them, there will be more than this, but I'm going to keep it to these five. The Samanids, that's not Ghaznawids, it's Ghaznawids, that's a misprint on my part. Mainly, so they will be in kind of in concord with a lot of the Shi'i dynasties. They're kind of just there as their own viziership. Ghaznavids will be in Afghanistan, Punjab, India, and southern Iran. They are going to be really significant because they will outlast actually a lot of these other ones. Not necessarily when it comes to like the years, but when it comes to eventually Muhammad al-Ghazni will establish his own rulership in India and they continue forward in a separate part of Muslim history. Seljuks, the Turks come in. When the Turks have come into Muslim history, they have never left. And that Seljuks will be the first major kind of intervention of that. The reason there's 3 dates here is they rule up until 1157 and then they separate from they combine with the Ayyubids and then they come back as their own thing in 1302. Until 1302. The Ghurids, also going to be interesting because they will move and they will eventually be a reason that the Mongols, these two are very closely related together, will come in and completely decimate the Muslim world. And the Khwarizm Shahs, unfortunately their major legacy is that they got destroyed by the Mongols completely. And they were probably responsible for why the Mongols hated the Muslims so much. So it's a brief overview of these.
Didn't the Mongols become Muslim?
They eventually did. They initially did not like them.
Oh, not in the beginning.
No, that'll be a whole other conversation. Why would a group of people that killed 5 million Muslims decide to convert to Islam? We'll get to it when it's time. I know. But yeah, why would you adopt a religion of the people you conquered? It'd be an interesting question to be had. But the Mongols, we don't have to see them as pure evil, because why? They actually end up rebuilding the Muslim empires in a higher state than they ever were before, after destruction. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Allah is the one who creates death and life to see which was best in action. Yeah. So, with that, we will conclude for today. Actually, any questions? Any other questions? Oh, we covered a lot of material. I'm so sorry. Yes.
Are they related to the Khwarizmi?
Yes, that's exactly what they are.
And the one right before, I might be like getting this wrong because geographically it's wrong, but like, are the Ghurids related So Totem Woody in Egypt?
No. That sounds similar, but it's not. Yeah, the woody will just be the name that's used there. Good question though. Anyone else?
I just want to know where he went.
Uh,
Where did he go?
We'll-
Where did he go?
We'll have some conversations about this offline. Alright, could someone hit the button please?